Hey, how's it going, everyone? How many dividend stocks should you own? A dividend investing strategy. Let's talk about it. When I was new to investing, I resonated with the belief that you should be diversified across all industries to hedge against risk, meaning some exposure to oil and gas, some to the defense sector, a little to utilities. You get the point. That way, all of your bases are covered. This strategy is basically manifested in a total market index fund like VTI. I don't know why, but every time I say VTI, it reminds me of a boy band group's name. Like next up on MTV is going to be VTI. I'm old enough to remember when MTV used to be the YouTube for music and for artists. But anyhow, then when I gained more stock market experience, the more I realized that diversification does not matter. What really matters to me now is exposure to high quality dividend compounders with cheese. If they happen to be diversified, great. If not, that's okay with me. With that said, whenever I go to a restaurant, I tend to always order the same thing. My partner, on the other hand, likes to experiment and try everything at least once. They prefer a diversified experience. So if it's an Indian restaurant we're talking about, if I like the pork vindaloo, I'm probably going to order the pork vindaloo every single time. I do not feel the need or desire to venture out of my comfort zone and risk profile. Am I missing out by not trying out the chicken korma special? Sure, but if the vindaloo is a winner, I'll stick with what I know will be a winner. I don't like to gamble when it comes to my stomach, I'll tell you that right now. So what's the general consensus on how many dividend holdings are appropriate in a portfolio? Well, some people believe that you cannot keep up with more than 5 to 6 holdings. Other people go wild and have like 200 different companies in their portfolio. And depending on who you follow on YouTube, they fall somewhere in between. But my thing is, if your strict rule is to have no more than 5 holdings, are you really not going to add an amazing company that is undervalued and on a dip to your portfolio because it's going to bump it up to 6? It just does not make any sense to me. It's like whenever I go to Costco, if I see one of my favorite cuts of meat on sale and I already have some meat back at home, am I just going to walk away? Absolutely not. I'm loading up on the pork belly, baby. And guess what? My family just acquired a deep freezer, which I never realized just how convenient having a second fridge really is. It's amazing and a game changer. I would recommend it 10 out of 10. Now, here's the cool thing about dividend compounders with cheese. If you have like 20 holdings, 10 of them won't even require your weekly attention. That is, if those 10 companies are set and forget growers that are reliable and steady. Talking about companies like Starbucks, Coca-Cola, Apple, and Realty Income. If anything, you'll just have to monitor and pay attention to the other 10 holdings. So even if you have like 20 holdings, I still don't think it's that big of a portfolio. Dare I even say up to 50 or 60 companies? Not too bad. Now, the bigger the number, the more effort and energy you must be willing to put in to stay up to date with all of those different companies. However, like I just mentioned, if you pick dividend compounders with cheese that are high quality, like Keurig Dr. Pepper or Texas Roadhouse, what you see on your screen, nothing catastrophic is probably going to happen in the next week or so. A good company running a solid operation will just be business as usual in April as it is in November. Now, some people believe in that mindset on an extreme level. For instance, some people put all of their eggs into one basket and just go all out into Procter & Gamble. Other people just put their entire life savings into Berkshire Hathaway. Would I want to do that? Absolutely not. There's too many delicious compounders out there for me to just settle on one. On that note, I'm lucky enough to live in a town that has a handful of different dining options, and I love that I get to eat a different cuisine whenever I want. Bless your heart if you live in a small town with only one small restaurant. I could never. As a guy that likes eating out often, I just can't get behind the romantic idea of living in a rural area with peace and quiet. Why? Because I need my Mexican food, my Korean food, my Thai food, my Italian food, my Turkish food, you name it, I need it. So I guess that influences my thought process when I think about selling everything to go all in on just one company. I can't do it. As called out earlier, some people will say it's impossible for one person, one human mind, to fully understand more than 6 to 10 companies. To that, I strongly disagree. It's like a tinfoil hat person telling me that the earth is flat. Hear me out. There's 365 days a year. If you spend maybe 30 days getting to know a company and understanding their future prospects, that means you can be competent for about 12 new companies a year. You do that over a lifespan and you'll become comfortable with a whole list of companies. And even if it's not with stocks, you should keep this mentality of being a student in life. It does not matter if you were a terrible student at school. Now you can open up the gates and study subjects that interest you. It's not financial advice, but man, if you take away anything from this video, it's this. Always be striving to learn something new or grasp a new concept. It keeps you young, trust me. Now, I'm not saying you should invest in hundreds of different companies, but rather from studying different companies, that knowledge will turn into potential stocks on your watch list, so you can have potential winners to replace your portfolio losers when the time is right. With that said, I try to stay in my comfort zone. I don't even bother trying to learn about certain sectors or industries, and if I'm going to be honest, I do not care about the oil and gas field. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I mean, in the beginning, I used to invest in every single sector. So at one point, I was invested into a couple oil companies that I do not understand. However, fortunately for me, I sold out of those positions a long time ago. And then there's also fields that I understand a lot, which is the pharmaceutical and medical devices space, but I choose not to invest into. But hey, that knowledge is there if you ever want to talk about Medtronic or Edwards Life Sciences and whatnot. On the other hand, I think it's a bizarre idea to invest into every single company in a specific industry. Like if your portfolio only consists of JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Morgan Stanley, like what's going to happen to your portfolio if a policy change happens up on the hill and it just crushes the banking industry? This is not financial advice, but I think that strategy is just wild. I could never. So for me, I like to stay in my circle of competence and invest in what I understand from first-hand experience. But I also invest into the real estate industry and tech companies based on what I have learned as an outsider. I'm just sharing with you my experience because based on your life and your experiences, you are probably super knowledgeable about certain industries and sectors. And here's the thing, we all have a one-up on Wall Street, as Peter Lynch likes to call it, the guy on the right side of your screen. We are the common man, the people doing the actual work and seeing what happens in the real world, unlike those Wall Street analysts who understand the world from their finance office. So to sum it up, I place priority in increasing my breadth and depth into many different areas. That way I can have exposure and a position into finance, into AI, into tobacco, into health insurance, into solar renewable energy, and places where I feel adequately comfortable with. But that does not mean I invest in every single sector and industry out there. Then again, the correct answer for most people, like if I was not into investing but know that it's important for me, I would just place all my eggs into index funds. More specifically, I'd call it a day by investing into SCHD, VU, and VTI. That's not financial advice, but that's what I would do if I was not knowledgeable. Unfortunately, I find investing very interesting and it is a hobby of mine, so I choose to invest into individual companies. If you want a more in-depth explanation, then check out my video, Is an ETF Better Than a Stock? Should I buy individual stocks or stick to an ETF? Now let's talk about how a portfolio's valuation makes a difference. I think a good rule of reference is the smaller your portfolio valuation is, then less holdings carry more weight. Meaning, if you have $1,000, like what you see on your screen right now, divided by 3 into 3 different positions, if 2 out of the 3 end up doing really well and they go up by 20% each, it will have a bigger impact on your overall portfolio. Keep this number in mind with the same starting principal amount of $1,000. On the other hand, if you have $1,000 broken up into 20 different holdings, or in this case, 20 different toppings, if 2 or 3 of those stocks do really well, the effect really won't be felt. Like if your cheese and pickles go up by 20%, the exact same as the first example, like that's awesome on paper, but the impact on the overall portfolio is just minuscule, right? $1,038 because it's broken down into 20 different holdings. I mean, call me cheesy, but I got the inspiration for all these different stock names from the channel name, Dividend Compounders. with cheese. Now, if my portfolio hits a valuation of about $1 million, I would want a bigger number of holdings to hedge against risk. Because listen, if I only have 3 holdings and one stock does really badly, then it would have a massive effect on the portfolio. I'm talking about the potential of going down by negative $300,000. But if I have a solid list of holdings, if 1 or 2 companies decide to have a bad year, the portfolio is still going to look okay. And besides, if I ever grow a portfolio to $1 million, I think it would be fun to have a few dozen different holdings, more money to throw into dividend compounders. So what you see on your screen is the Colorado Buffaloes football team, which is an interesting college football story. You see, the team has a few talented players, but their stars were surrounded by a heavy supporting cast. As a result, the team went 4-8 this past season. Like Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter together had a gain of 70%, but their O-line, D-line, and other teammates and staff, they had a loss of 103%. So collectively, the team resulted in a negative 33% win rate. So this philosophy goes both ways. Sometimes the losers can weigh down the winners of your portfolio. But can you imagine if Colorado did not at least have Travis Hunter? Now, Travis Hunter is a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent that plays both ways. He plays offense and defense, which is unheard of in American football. Without him, the team would have been worse off. And with that said, as of recently, Coach Prime, which is the guy in charge of the Colorado Buffaloes, he utilized the transfer portal and rehauled the entire team again. And on paper, I have to say, I would argue their team this year should be dramatically better than last year's team. They have an entire new running back rotation, tight ends, some of the best wide receivers in the country, some big boys in the trenches on offense and defense, and they have legitimate linebackers. So I'm pretty excited to see how they do against the Big 12 Conference, especially since this is the star players' final season in college football before going to the NFL. As for me and my personal portfolio, it's transient. I add and subtract companies throughout the year. I don't have a hard count or rule of how many holdings I must have. If I like a company and it's been on my watch list, I add it if the opportunity presents itself. If a company exceeds my intrinsic valuation, sometimes I sell out of it. But for the most part, I like to have blue chip companies to make up the bulk of my portfolio so that it doesn't require day-to-day babysitting. That's my personal game plan. I don't have a hard set rule of how many. Rather, the question is more so, can I accumulate dividend compounders with cheese? If that means my portfolio grows to 40 holdings, that's okay with me. I invest where I can find the best value for the price I'm paying. That's why I have a watch list of a few dozen companies. And even that watch list is fluid with changes happening weekly or monthly. It's kind of like my long list of hobbies. Sometimes I'm into history podcasts, and then 3 months down the road, I'm nerding out about fantasy books. And that's something that I learned in life. Don't make your job your whole personality. Invest into hobbies and have some interests outside of your 9 to 5. This is even more important if you have been feeling down or bored lately. Do not underestimate the power of a good hobby and a good community. So if you enjoy books and you have a book recommendation, please let me know. My recommendation to you is going to be The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. It will slap you across the face. That's just how good it is. What do you think? How many holdings do you have in your portfolio? What do you recommend? Or what are your thoughts on this subject? Please correct me if I'm wrong and help me to see the light. And eventually, as the channel grows, I promise I'll do a full portfolio reveal. But not yet. And with that said, talk to you next time, my friend. See ya, man.